Fat Albert, 2004. Cast, Then and Now, 2026. Would you recognize them today? What if the movie you laughed at in 2004 quietly shaped lives far more complicated than the screen ever showed? Fat Albert introduced us to a generation of young black performers, but fame didn't promise safety, stability, or happiness. Some built legendary careers, others vanished from Hollywood, and a few survived only by walking away. In 2026, their stories look very different from the nostalgia we remember. Who really won and who paid the highest price? Stay with us as we revisit the cast of Fat Albert Then and Now, and don't forget to subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, where the real stories begin after the credits roll. Kenan Thompson. Kenan Thompson entered Fat Albert 2004 at a pivotal moment that few audiences fully recognized at the time. At 26, he was already a veteran of television comedy shaped by years at Nickelodeon on All That, and Kenan and Kel, yet still facing the dangerous gap between former child star and sustainable adult career. Playing Fat Albert was not about flashy punchlines. It was about warmth, timing, and emotional steadiness qualities that would quietly become his professional signature. The film didn't launch him overnight, but it confirmed something more valuable. Kenan could anchor a project without stealing attention, a rare skill in comedy-driven ensembles. What followed was one of the most durable careers in modern American television. Just 1 year before Fat Albert premiered, Kenan had joined Saturday Night Live in 2003. By 2026, he is widely recognized as the longest-serving cast member in the show's history, surpassing 2 decades of live performances, shifting cast generations, and cultural change. Unlike comedians who burn hot and fast, Kenan built trust writers, trusted his delivery producers, trusted his reliability, and audiences trusted his presence. His comedy rarely relied on shock. Instead, it leaned on rhythm, facial control, and emotional intelligence. Yet longevity came with invisible costs. Years of late nights, relentless rehearsal schedules, and constant travel placed strain on his personal life. His marriage to Christina Evangeline, once viewed as unusually stable in comedy circles, ended in divorce in 2022 after more than a decade together. Around the same period, Kenan publicly acknowledged living with GERD, a chronic condition that affects sleep, digestion, and stamina, no small burden for a performer whose job depends on physical timing and energy. How many comedians are laughing on stage while silently negotiating exhaustion behind the curtain? Professionally, Kenan adapted rather than resisted change. When his NBC sitcom Kenan ended after 2 seasons, he didn't frame it as failure. Instead, he shifted focus toward producing, mentoring, and building long-term creative control. By 2026, his estimated net worth sits between $9 and $10 million, not from viral moments or controversy, but from consistency, steady paychecks, syndication, voice work, and behind-the-scenes development. In an era obsessed with reinvention, Kenan's quiet strength has been endurance. What makes his story especially compelling for older audiences is its realism. Kenan Thompson did not escape hardship, nor did he implode under pressure. He aged inside the industry, something Hollywood rarely allows. His performances grew subtler, his public image calmer, and his priorities clearer. He became a father, a co-parent, and a creative leader without turning his private life into spectacle. That restraint is precisely why his career still stands when so many others faded. Looking back from 2026, Kenan's role in Fat Albert feels symbolic. He wasn't just portraying a character rooted in nostalgia, he was standing at the edge of a long, disciplined journey. Fame did not save him from loss, and talent did not shield him from fatigue. But commitment, adaptability, and emotional control carried him forward. In a business that rewards noise, Kenan Thompson survived by mastering balance, and that may be his most impressive performance of all. Marques Houston. Marques Houston stepped into Fat Albert 2004 at a delicate turning point in his life and career. At just 23 years old, he played Dumb Donald, a character hidden behind a mask, quiet, cautious, and emotionally guarded. For many viewers, the role felt symbolic, though few recognized how closely it mirrored Marquez's real-life transition from beloved child performer to scrutinized adult figure. Having already grown up in the public eye as a member of IMX and a familiar face on television, Fat Albert marked one of his last high-profile acting moments before music and personal life began to take center stage. Marquez's early fame was both a gift and a burden. As a teenager, he experienced commercial success that many artists never reach, but that success arrived before he had the emotional tools to process pressure, expectation, and identity. After Fat Albert, he gradually shifted away from acting and leaned fully into R&B. Albums such as Veteran 2005 and Mr. Houston 2009 helped him remain visible in a changing music landscape, though they never recaptured the mainstream dominance of his youth. Still, his ability to sustain a career into adulthood without collapsing publicly speaks to a quieter form of resilience often overlooked. However, Marquez's journey was far from peaceful. As the years passed, his personal life became a focal point of online discussion. His marriage to Mia Dickey drew intense public backlash due to their age difference, placing him under a level of moral judgment that extended well beyond his work. Instead of disappearing or escalating conflict, Marquez responded with withdrawal, reducing interviews, limiting public appearances, and reframing his priorities. By the mid-2010s, the emotional cost of constant scrutiny became evident. While Marquez never publicly disclosed a diagnosed mental illness, his behavior reflected exhaustion, fewer performances, more spiritual focus, and a clear retreat from celebrity culture. He turned toward religion, family life, and behind-the-scenes creativity, choosing screenwriting and production over life on stage. This shift was not framed as a comeback, but as self-preservation, a recognition that longevity sometimes means redefining success entirely. Financially, Marquez Houston did not implode like many former child stars. As of 2026, his estimated net worth is approximately $2.3 million accumulated through music royalties, production work, and earlier earnings. While modest by superstar standards, it reflects stability rather than loss. He is no longer chasing chart positions or headlines. Instead, he has opted for control, privacy, and consistency. That decision alone sets him apart from many peers who struggled to adapt once the spotlight dimmed. For audiences aged 45 to 65, Marquez's story resonates on a deeply human level. It is not about scandal or triumph, but about navigating adulthood after being defined too early. He learned, sometimes painfully, that talent does not shield one from judgment, and that silence can be a form of strength rather than weakness. Unlike his masked character, Dumb Donald Marquez eventually removed the need to perform for approval, choosing to live without explanation. Looking back from 2026, Marquez Houston's Fat Albert role feels less like a highlight and more like a quiet farewell to childhood fame. His journey reminds us that growing up in public leaves invisible scars, and survival does not always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like choosing family over applause, boundaries over validation, and peace over popularity, and walking away before the noise takes everything with it. Omarion. Omarion appeared in Fat Albert 2004 at a moment of quiet turbulence, even though audiences mostly noticed him as the confident antagonist Reggie. At just 20 years old, Omarion was already navigating the collapse of B2K, one of the most commercially successful R&B groups of the early 2000s. The film role itself was brief, but its timing mattered. It arrived as his carefully managed boy band identity was cracking, forcing him to confront adulthood not as a group member, but as an individual responsible for his own direction. When B2K dissolved amid financial disputes and managerial tension, Omarion faced a crossroads that has ended many young careers. Instead of retreating, he leaned into reinvention. His debut solo album, Oh 2005, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, and the single Icebox became one of the defining R&B records of the decade. Success followed, but it was different from his teenage fame, more demanding, lonelier, and less protected. The industry expected him to replace a group's momentum with personal endurance, a test that exposed both discipline and emotional cost. Behind the music, Omarion's private life became increasingly public. His long-term relationship with April Jones, the mother of his 2 children, unraveled in full view of reality television and social media. Accusations, betrayal narratives, and public commentary turned intimate conflict into entertainment. Rather than escalating the spectacle, Omarion chose restraint, rare in a culture that rewards reaction. When personal pain becomes public property, is silence a weakness or a form of self-defense? That decision reshaped his image. While peers chased relevance through controversy, Omarion leaned toward distance. He continued releasing music, but with a noticeable tonal shift. Projects like Sex Playlist and The Connection emphasized introspection, wellness, and spiritual balance over aggression or excess. He spoke openly about emotional fatigue and the psychological pressure of fame without turning vulnerability into branding. This quieter evolution confused some fans expecting constant hits, yet it revealed a long-term strategy rooted in sustainability. By 2026, Omarion stands as one of the few early 2000s male R&B stars who avoided public implosion. At 41 years old, his estimated net worth is around $6 million, built through music catalogs, touring authorship, and selective media ventures. Financially secure but no longer driven by mainstream dominance, he has prioritized fatherhood, physical health, and creative autonomy. Unlike many contemporaries, he resisted the temptation to monetize chaos, choosing instead to age out of spectacle with dignity. What resonates most with older American audiences is the maturity of that choice. Omarion did not disappear, nor did he cling to youth. He accepted that growth often looks like subtraction. Fewer interviews, fewer explanations, fewer performances driven by obligation. In an industry that equates visibility with value, his path challenges a deeply ingrained assumption that success must always be loud to be real. Looking back from 2026, Omarion's role in Fat Albert feels almost prophetic. Reggie was a character defined by tension and confrontation, yet the man behind him eventually chose calm over conflict. His journey illustrates a truth rarely celebrated in pop culture, that survival sometimes means stepping back, not stepping up. Fame tested him early, heartbreak tested him publicly, but self-control carried him forward. And in a business built on noise, Omarion's most powerful statement may be the life he chose to live quietly on his own terms. Kyla Pratt. Kyla Pratt entered Fat Albert 2004 at a moment that quietly defined the rest of her life. At just 18, she played Doris, a small, observant role that mirrored her real position in Hollywood at the time. Kyla was already a familiar face to American families through television and animation, yet she stood on the edge of adulthood, carrying responsibilities most teenagers never face. Unlike many young performers chasing louder breakthroughs, Fat Albert arrived as a pause rather than a launch, placing her between early fame and irreversible life choices. By the mid-2000s, Kyla had achieved something rare for a child actor: steady multi-platform success. She balanced live-action television on One-on-One with voice work as Penny Proud on The Proud Family, securing financial stability while still in her teens. However, consistency came at a cost. Long filming hours, public expectations, and the pressure to remain unproblematic left little space for error or rest. Around this period, Kyla entered motherhood earlier than many of her peers, a decision that would fundamentally reshape her priorities and career rhythm. Unlike stars whose personal lives combusted publicly, Kyla's struggles unfolded quietly. Juggling pregnancy, parenting, and production schedules forced her into constant emotional calculation. Opportunities were weighed not by prestige, but by practicality: how long she would be away from home, how stable the set environment felt, and whether the role justified the separation. As the industry evolved, Kyla chose selectivity over saturation. She declined roles that demanded constant reinvention or exposure, opting instead for work that allowed continuity. Her return to the Proud family, louder and prouder, was not framed as a comeback, but as a continuation proof that longevity does not require constant visibility. Voice acting, often undervalued by audiences, gave her something priceless creative fulfillment without sacrificing privacy or stability. Financially, Kyla's decisions proved sound. By 2026, at age 39, her estimated net worth stands around $4 million accumulated through television contracts, voice acting royalties, and long-term syndication. Unlike many peers who earned more early and lost it later, Kyla's earnings reflect sustainability rather than spectacle. She never chased viral relevance, nor did she monetize personal hardship. Instead, she built a life that could support both career and family without collapsing under scrutiny. Emotionally, Kyla's story resonates deeply with audiences aged 45 to 65 because it mirrors real-life trade-offs. She did not rebel against Hollywood, nor did she let it consume her. She matured within it quietly, redefining what success looks like for women who become mothers while still young. There were moments of exhaustion, admissions of loneliness, and long gaps between major projects, but no public unraveling. That restraint, often mistaken for absence, was actually discipline. Looking back from 2026, Kyla Pratt's role in Fat Albert feels emblematic. Doris was not the loudest presence on screen, but she saw everything. In real life, Kyla followed a similar path, choosing carefully, and refusing to be rushed by an industry that profits from urgency. She aged without scandal, raised her children outside tabloid culture, and preserved her identity in a system that often erases it. In the end, Kyla Pratt's journey challenges a common assumption about fame, that staying visible is the same as staying successful. Her life suggests something more enduring, that stability, intention, and emotional boundaries may be the truest markers of longevity. And for a generation watching from a distance, her story quietly asks whether the greatest victory isn't being remembered, but being at peace with who you became when the cameras stopped rolling. Shedrack Anderson III. Shedrack Anderson III entered Fat Albert 2004, carrying a resume that suggested promise rather than certainty. At 27, he portrayed Rudy, soft-spoken, introspective, and physically slight, bringing an inner stillness that contrasted with the film's louder personalities. Off-screen, Shedrack was far from tentative. He had trained seriously as a performer, including formal study and years of disciplined preparation, believing that craft would eventually meet opportunity. For many actors of his generation, Fat Albert looked like the moment when preparation would finally pay off. What followed, however, was not a breakout, but a long test of patience. After the film, Shedrack continued working television appearances, independent projects, auditions that reached the final rounds, yet none crystallized into the kind of momentum that sustains an acting career at the studio level. The industry he faced in the late 2000s was narrowing, not expanding, with fewer mid-budget films and a shrinking space for character-driven performers. Talent alone proved insufficient when timing and market appetite shifted away. As professional uncertainty stretched on, responsibility grew heavier. Marriage and fatherhood brought purpose but also pressure. Acting income is rarely predictable, and as years passed without a defining role, the emotional strain became more tangible. Shedrack confronted a reality many performers quietly face: the need to support a family can outweigh the pursuit of an unstable dream. When survival and passion collide, which one deserves priority, rather than clinging to an identity that no longer provided stability? Shedrack made a decisive pivot. He stepped back from acting and redirected his focus toward health, fitness, and entrepreneurship areas, where discipline translated more directly into results. This transition was not glamorous. It required starting again, building credibility outside Hollywood, and accepting that public recognition would fade. Yet it also offered control over schedule income and self-worth. In an industry where agency is often an illusion, this choice restored autonomy. By the early 2010s, his life had reshaped around consistency instead of auditions. Training methods, personal coaching, and business development replaced casting calls. The spotlight dimmed, but the pressure eased. Shedrack's journey illustrates a rarely acknowledged truth. Leaving Hollywood does not always mean failure. Sometimes it means refusing to be slowly eroded by uncertainty. Financially, his path reflects modest stability rather than excess. By 2026, at 48 years old, estimates place his net worth around $500,000, not the fortune once imagined, but an honest measure of self-sufficiency. For viewers aged 45 to 65, Shedrack's story carries particular weight. It mirrors the experience of many professionals who discover midlife recalibration is not defeat, but adaptation. He did not spiral publicly, nor did he romanticize struggle. He chose practicality over pride, family over fantasy. That decision, while invisible to tabloids, required a different kind of courage than chasing applause. Looking back from 2026, Rudy's quiet presence in Fat Albert feels symbolic rather than incidental. The character listened more than he spoke, absorbed more than he demanded. In life, Shedrack followed a similar path, observing the limits of the industry, accepting change without bitterness, and redirecting his energy towards something sustainable. His journey challenges a deeply ingrained Hollywood myth that perseverance must always end in stardom. Instead, Shedrack Anderson III represents another outcome, one equally valid and far more common. A talented man who recognized when to step away, rebuilt his sense of purpose, and found dignity beyond the screen. In a culture that celebrates only the loudest successes, his story reminds us that stability, responsibility, and self-respect are achievements too, just measured in quieter ways. Aaron Frazier. Aaron Frazier stepped into Fat Albert 2004 as Old Weird Harold, a character defined as much by physical presence as by emotional awkwardness. At 25, Aaron stood nearly 2 meters tall, instantly recognizable and impossible to ignore. That visibility brought short-term memorability, but it also carried a hidden cost. In Hollywood, being unforgettable does not always mean being employable. And for Aaron, his defining traits soon became professional limitations rather than advantages. Following Fat Albert, Aaron continued to audition and land small parts, including appearances in films such as House of Sand and Fog. Yet the pattern quickly became familiar roles, arrived sporadically, often boxed into narrow physical stereotypes. The industry's appetite for diversity in body types remained shallow, and as casting cycles tightened in the late 2000s, opportunities thinned. Unlike leading men who could age into authority or romantic credibility, Aaron found himself competing for fewer and fewer spaces. Work did not vanish overnight. It simply slowed until momentum quietly dissolved. As auditions became less frequent, financial pressure replaced artistic ambition. Rent living expenses and the absence of long-term contracts forced practical decisions. Aaron's struggle was not marked by scandal addiction or public collapse. It was defined by uncertainty, the slow realization that effort no longer guaranteed forward motion. Confronted with that reality, Aaron chose a path many in Hollywood resist until it's too late. He walked away before resentment took root. Transitioning into real estate was not driven by passion or prestige, but necessity. Starting over meant acquiring new knowledge, entering a competitive field without celebrity leverage, and confronting the vulnerability of being a beginner again in his 30s. The shift demanded humility, patience, and resilience, especially during early years when income remained unstable and confidence fragile. Psychologically, the transition was heavier than it appeared from the outside. Acting had provided identity validation and a sense of belonging even when work was inconsistent. Leaving that world required Aaron to redefine his self-worth beyond applause or recognition. The process was not publicly documented, but its effects were real isolation, self-doubt, and the quiet grief of closing a chapter without ceremony. Over time, however, the structure and logic of business replaced the emotional volatility of audition culture, offering something Hollywood never could: predictability. By 2026, at 46 years old, Aaron Frazier lives far from the entertainment industry that once shaped his daily life. His estimated net worth stands around $300,000, reflecting modest stability rather than financial triumph. He is no longer introduced as an actor, nor does he chase relevance through nostalgia appearances. Instead, he has chosen privacy routine and the dignity of earning without spectacle. His success is measured not in headlines, but in sustainability. For American audiences aged 45 to 65, Aaron's story resonates because it mirrors countless real-world experiences. Career-stall industries change and reinvention becomes less about ambition and more about survival. Aaron did not cling to a fading identity, nor did he romanticize struggle. He adapted even when adaptation meant invisibility. That choice, though rarely celebrated, reflects emotional maturity rather than defeat. Looking back from 2026, Old Weird Harold's position on the margins of Fat Albert feels unexpectedly symbolic. The character was present but rarely centered, noticed, yet overlooked. In life, Aaron navigated a similar arc, visible for a moment, then forced to find footing elsewhere. His journey challenges a popular myth about Hollywood that persistence alone guarantees reward. Aaron Frazier's legacy is not defined by a long filmography or lasting fame, but by a quieter achievement, the ability to step away without self-destruction. In a culture obsessed with spotlight and status, his life offers a sobering reminder that stability, reinvention, and self-respect can exist entirely outside the frame. And sometimes choosing to leave the stage is not giving up. It is choosing to stand upright when the applause has ended. Alfonso Macaulay. Alfonso Macaulay entered Fat Albert 2004 at age 20 as Bucky, the fast-talking, energetic kid who hovered at the edge of the group. It was a role that fit his natural rhythm, sharp timing, physical comedy, and an instinct for reaction shots. For many viewers, Bucky felt like the promise of momentum, proof that this young performer could move seamlessly between humor and heart. Off-screen, Alfonso carried something equally important but less visible: academic discipline, and a belief that preparation would widen his options in an unpredictable business. In the years that followed, Alfonso worked steadily without the sudden breakthrough that often defines Hollywood narratives. He appeared in respected sports and ensemble films like Glory Road and Pride, then found a more reliable lane in television comedy. Sitcoms such as Breaking In offered consistency, a paycheck, and room to sharpen craft, yet they also came with an invisible ceiling. Supporting roles arrived, leading turns did not. The industry's appetite for familiar archetypes meant he was frequently cast for the same quick-witted energy that first got him noticed. That repetition can be quietly corrosive. For an actor who knows he has range, being valued for one dimension becomes a long negotiation with self-doubt. Alfonso's career didn't stall dramatically, it narrowed. Scripts asked for versions of Bucky again and again, even as he aged out of youthful frames. Do you accept safety and stay employed, or risk uncertainty to chase growth that may never be rewarded? As the entertainment landscape shifted in the 2010s, Alfonso adapted. He leaned into stand-up writing and digital platforms, spaces where timing and personality matter more than casting type. The rise of short-form video briefly reignited visibility, reminding audiences that humor can travel faster than traditional gatekeepers allow. But online attention proved volatile, governed by algorithms rather than auditions. He learned a modern lesson many performers face: reach can be vast and fleeting at the same time. What distinguishes Alfonso's path is durability without spectacle. There were no public implosions, no viral scandals engineered for relevance. Instead, he accumulated credit experience across formats, relationships built over time, and a reputation for professionalism. By 2026, at 41 years old, his estimated net worth sits around $1 million, reflecting steady work rather than outsized fame. It's a living earned through persistence, not a jackpot won through luck. For American audiences aged 45 to 65, Alfonso's story resonates because it mirrors real careers outside Hollywood. Many people discover that talent opens doors, but timing decides how far they swing. Advancement becomes incremental. Fulfillment requires recalibration. Alfonso didn't vanish when trends changed, he adjusted his footing. He remained present in the industry even when the industry didn't spotlight him. Looking back from 2026, Bucky's restless energy reads differently. It wasn't just comedic noise. It was ambition in motion testing boundaries, seeking space. In life, Alfonso carried that same drive through quieter chapters, learning when to push and when to pivot. His journey challenges a narrow definition of success that prizes only stardom. Instead, it argues for something steadier relevance earned over time, adaptability in the face of shifting rules, and the humility to keep working when applause is inconsistent. Alfonso Macaulay may not headline nostalgia tours or dominate reruns, but his career tells a subtler truth about survival in entertainment. Longevity doesn't always arrive with trophies or trending clips. Sometimes it arrives as the ability to keep creating, keep learning, and keep showing up long after the first wave has passed. And in an industry built on noise, that quiet persistence may be the most reliable measure of success. Jermaine Williams. Jermaine Williams appeared in Fat Albert 2004 as Mushmouth, a character often misunderstood at first glance, soft-spoken, gentle, and frequently underestimated. At 22 years old, Jermaine brought a surprising emotional weight to the role, proving that presence does not require volume. For audiences, Mushmouth offered warmth and loyalty. For Jermaine himself, the film represented an early foothold in mainstream cinema and the hope that steady work would naturally evolve into long-term opportunity. In the years following Fat Albert, Jermaine did what many actors are told is the right path. He kept working. He appeared in respected projects such as The Great Debater Stomp the Yard and World's Greatest Dad, often surrounded by high-profile casts and strong directors. On paper, his resume looked healthy. In reality, something crucial was missing momentum. Roles came, but rarely led to the next level. He was present in meaningful stories, yet remained just outside their center, a position that can quietly erode confidence over time. Unlike peers whose careers collapsed publicly, Jermaine's pressure came from comparison rather than crisis. Watching contemporaries break through while he hovered in supporting territory forced a difficult emotional reckoning. Acting remained his profession but not his guarantee. Income fluctuated, and the uncertainty of each year became a test of endurance rather than ambition. Instead of disengaging from the arts, Jermaine widened his relationship with them. Dance and early passion remained a grounding force, offering physical discipline and emotional release. He also became involved in community-based and charitable efforts, including work connected to youth arts programs. These spaces provided something Hollywood rarely offers: appreciation without hierarchy. Over time, Jermaine expanded into producing not as a pivot driven by ego, but as a practical way to remain active and relevant without waiting for permission to be cast. That transition was not about reinvention, but preservation. Producing allowed him to participate in storytelling while reducing dependence on casting cycles. It also restored a sense of agency, choosing projects, shaping narratives, and contributing beyond performance alone. This shift reflected maturity rather than surrender, acknowledging that creative survival often requires evolution rather than stubborn persistence. Financially, Jermaine's story is modest but honest. By 2026, at 43 years old, his estimated net worth is approximately $400,000. It is not the wealth promised by early exposure, but it represents continuity. He never lost everything, nor did he rely on nostalgia. He remained employed, adaptable, and engaged, qualities rarely celebrated, yet essential for long-term survival in entertainment. For American audiences aged 45 to 65, Jermaine Williams's journey feels deeply familiar. Many recognize the experience of being competent, committed, and consistent, yet never fully rewarded in proportion to effort. His life reflects a reality outside Hollywood fantasy, that dignity often lies in staying upright rather than standing out. There were no tabloid headlines, no redemption arcs staged for applause. His success was quieter, measured in self-respect and sustainability. Looking back from 2026, Mushmouth's character reads differently. Once seen as fragile or peripheral, he embodied resilience long before the word became fashionable. Jermaine carried that same quality into adulthood, absorbing disappointment without bitterness, continuing forward without spectacle. He did not demand attention. He earned continuity. Jermaine Williams challenges a narrow definition of achievement. His career reminds us that not every meaningful journey includes stardom, and not every contribution needs validation to matter. In an industry obsessed with breakthrough moments, his life tells another story. The value of staying present, staying creative, and staying whole, even when recognition remains limited. And sometimes that quiet endurance is the strongest statement an artist can make. More than 20 years after Fat Albert 2004, the journeys of its black cast challenge everything we think we know about success. Some achieved longevity, others chose stability over spotlight, and a few learned that survival itself can be a victory. Fame did not protect them from pressure comparison or quiet sacrifice, and talent alone was never a guarantee. Looking at them now in 2026, we're left with an uncomfortable question. Is success about staying visible or staying whole? Which path do you respect the most, and which story surprised you? Join the conversation below and stay with Legends of Black Excellence for stories that history rarely tells.